Have you ever walked into work and felt a knot in your stomach because of your boss? Yeah, same here. See, I once worked for someone who was widely respected. People called him a genius. He was sharp, influential, and admired in the industry. And I have to admit, I was in awe of him at first. But behind closed doors, he was toxic, unpredictable, belittling, impossible to please. And for a long time, I thought the only option was to keep my head down or even just quit. I never thought I could stand up to him. Not someone that powerful, but then everything changed for me when I discovered a few key tactics that helped me to take back my power without losing my job or even my sanity. So in this video, I'm sharing 5 genius tactics that help me stay sane, stay professional, and even thrive under pressure. Because quitting isn't your only option. If you're new here, hi, I'm Elizabeth, an expert on social change, and I've spent the last decade advising Fortune 500 companies on building more productive and inclusive workplaces. I'm also the author of the book Human Skills, your vital manual for navigating workplace differences. Let's jump in. Tactic 1, don't give away your power by staying silent. Let's talk about silence. And I want to start by asking you something that might hit home a little bit close. Have you ever stayed silent around your boss? Not because you agreed, but because you were afraid. If you have, you're not alone. Most of us at some point have swallowed our truth to keep the peace. But here's the thing, silence in a toxic environment isn't just silence. It becomes a tool for your boss that they can use against you. Why? Because there's no universal understanding of silence. In a diverse workplace, silence can be misinterpreted in many ways, as agreement, as passivity, as indifference, or even worse, as a sign of weakness. And for a toxic boss who thrives on control, that silence can add fuel to their fire. It reinforces their dominance. It tells them, I can treat you this way, and I know that you will take it. But here's the truth. Your voice is your most powerful tool in the workplace. It's how you advocate for yourself, how you set boundaries, and clarify your value. And when you silence yourself out of fear, especially repeated fear, it just doesn't hurt your career. It starts to erode your mental and physical well-being, and even sometimes your self-worth. The stress of holding everything in, of walking on eggshells, of shrinking yourself daily, it builds. And eventually, it spills out, often in the form of burnout, anxiety, or even illness. And here's what toxic bosses count on: your silence. Because bullies don't back down from quiet, they double down. So if speaking up scares you, that's okay. Just start small. You don't have to shout, but you do have to make a stand. Try this. I have a different perspective I would like to share. Or, I don't feel comfortable with how that was said. These aren't attacks, they're assertions. And they send a signal that I have a voice and I will use it. In fact, in my book, Human Skills, I offer practical language and confidence-building tools to help you find your voice in high-stakes situations, even when fear is present. Because fear will come and go, but your right to be treated with respect is non-negotiable, and it starts with speaking up. Tactic 2, stop saying yes when you should be saying not now. Let's be real. Does your yes sometimes mean I'm afraid to say no? Boundaries are one of the most misunderstood and feared human skill. And with a toxic or unpredictable boss, setting boundaries can feel downright terrifying. You might worry, will I seem uncooperative? Will this come back to bite me? That fear is totally normal. In fact, it's a signal that you are stepping into growth. Because boundaries aren't about being difficult. They're about being clear, responsible, and self-respecting. Here's the key shift. Setting boundaries is not a rejection of responsibility. It's an act of accountability. I'm going to repeat that again. Setting boundaries is not a rejection of responsibility. It's an act of accountability. That's because when you say, I want to give this my full attention, or can we schedule time tomorrow when I can focus on this properly, you're not backing away from the task. You're owning your time and your ability to deliver high quality work. And guess what? When done well, boundaries actually help you gain respect, not lose it. They communicate clarity, they communicate confidence and maturity, even to a difficult boss. I go deep into this in my book, Human Skills, where there's a full section dedicated to boundary setting in all areas of work, from time management to communication to emotional bandwidth. It's full of scripts, real-world scenarios, and tips to help you minimize retribution while maximizing self-respect. Because when you learn to hold your boundaries with calm accountability, not defensiveness or fear, you become someone who leads by example. And remember, people may not like your boundaries at first, especially if they've benefited from your lack of them. But over time, they will come to respect your clarity. Tactic 3, react rationally instead of emotionally. Okay, time for a real myth buster. Emotions have no place in the workplace. You probably have heard of that, right? But here's the truth. Emotions are already in the workplace, whether we admit it or not. Why? That's because we're human. And being human doesn't switch off the moment we walk into the office or log into a Zoom call. So the goal isn't to suppress our emotions, it's to become aware of them. That's emotional awareness, one of the most powerful human skills you can develop. Let me be clear. Having emotions isn't a weakness. What can be harmful, though, is the inability to recognize, own, or regulate those emotions. That's when frustration turns into impulsive emails, passive-aggressive comments, or full-on shutdowns, which not only escalate tension, by the way, but actually makes us look unprofessional. And here's the thing, toxic bosses often want you to react. And when you react impulsively, you actually lose your power and sometimes your credibility. But when you pause, when you breathe, and choose how to respond, you rise above everything. You stay aligned with your values and integrity. That's not a weakness. That's real leadership right there. You can say, I'm feeling frustrated right now. I need a moment to gather my thoughts so we can have a productive conversation. That right there is a sign of emotional awareness and maturity. Emotional awareness, by the way, is actually the foundation for every other human skill. That's because when you know what you're feeling and why you're feeling that way, you can communicate clearly, you can set boundaries, you can make decisions and even disagreements without being disrespectful. Because here's the bottom line. When we let our emotions lead us unconsciously, we mirror the chaos of the toxic boss. When we understand, though, on the other hand, and we own our emotions, we actually become the steady force in the room. We become the great leader that we wish our toxic boss was. Tactic 4, be curious instead of defensive. When your boss snaps, criticizes, or micromanages, what's your first reaction? Do you instantly get defensive? Do you shut down? Do you start texting your best friend about how much you hate your job? No, just pause for a second. What if, instead of reacting, you got curious? That's where this tactic comes in. Curiosity over defensiveness. But here's the deeper layer, and it's a powerful one, by the way. Are you willing to look at your own behavior too? I know that it's easy to point fingers when someone is toxic, but self-awareness, a foundational human skill, invites us to ask, am I doing anything here, even unconsciously, by the way, that might be contributing to the tension? Maybe you're being passive-aggressive. Maybe you shut down instead of communicating clearly. Maybe you're assuming the worst before checking the facts. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about taking ownership for your side of that interaction. Because when you shift from blaming others to ownership, you actually take back your power. So try this next time. Instead of asking, why are they like this? Ask, what's going on here and how am I showing up in this conversation? Approach the situation with curiosity, both towards them and yourself. That's where real connection and real change begins. Tactic 5, keep the receipts just in case. Let me ask you a simple but crucial question. Do you document important conversation with your boss? Not just the big ones, or the ones where decisions are made, expectations are set, or tension shows up. If you don't, you're not alone. Most of us assume that what's said will be remembered. But here's the reality, and especially with a toxic boss. What's said can shift, can change, or can conveniently never happen. That's why documentation isn't about being paranoid, it's about being professional. It's a quiet form of self-protection, by the way, and it's one of the most underutilized workplace tools available to you. Let me just break it down for you. Toxic bosses often thrive in the gray area, the vague request, the shifting expectation, blaming others when things go sideways. And if you're not keeping track of what was agreed to, they can easily turn the story around and leave you holding the blame. But when you follow up with a quick email that says something like, hey, just to quickly confirm that you'd like the proposal by Friday at noon and we'll meet on Monday to review, correct? You're doing two very important things. One, you're creating clarity. Two, you're creating a paper trail that protects your accountability. That isn't about escalating conflict, by the way, it's about avoiding it. And here's something you might not expect. Consistent, calm documentation can actually reduce conflict. It signals that you're thoughtful, organized, and not easily thrown. It discourages manipulation because it creates structure. And structure, by the way, makes it a lot more harder to twist the narrative. Also, documenting isn't just about the emails. It can be notes after meetings, saved drafts, even voice memos that you send to yourself if something doesn't feel right. The point is this: track what matters. In my experience, this practice reinforces integrity, not just because it's smart, but because it helps you stay grounded. When the environment feels chaotic or unsafe around you, in particular, having your own system gives you clarity, confidence, and evidence. So the question is this: are you trusting your memory or building your protection plan? Start now, not because something will go wrong, but because you'll be ready if it does. So now, before we wrap, I can't emphasize this enough. You must know that you can't change someone who doesn't want to be changed. Some bosses are just not healthy leaders. No amount of human skill or empathy would turn them into someone they're not ready to become. That's not your fault. So if you've tried the tactics, you've listened, you've reflected, set boundaries, stayed calm, and nothing changes, you need to give yourself permission to say, maybe this isn't healthy for me. Now, I know that leaving a job isn't easy. Jobs are hard to find. You might have bills and responsibilities, or a resume that depends on stability. I get it. But that doesn't mean you stay stuck. What you can do, however, starting today, is to build your exit plan. That means updating your resume, networking quietly, learning new skills, or simply documenting what's happening in case you need support or legal recourse. Because here's the bottom line: your self-worth is more important than any paycheck. Staying sane at work is important, but so is knowing when to walk away. Now, I would love to hear from you, because this conversation is bigger than just one video. Have you ever had to deal with a toxic boss? What tactic helped you stay sane or take back your power? Drop your story in the comments, not just for me, but for others in the community who might be going through it right now and need to know that they are not alone. And if today's video gave you something useful, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who is stuck in a toxic workplace and needs a lifeline. Also, if you want to go deeper into this conversation, into these strategies, check out my book, Human Skills: The Power to Connect and Navigate Workplace Differences. There's a whole section on boundary setting, emotional awareness, communication, and the skills that help you not just survive, but thrive even in a toxic work environment. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve to feel powerful at work, not powerless. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.